Okay, let's talk parts. So parts are a function of products. What do I mean by parts? Okay, so if I am looking at the next tab over on the product configurator, you see this called parts. And parts are just a way for you to take whatever the customer has input and create things out of that. So if the customer has ordered a cabinet door, for example, you can break that cabinet door down on the back end into all kinds of different parts, styles, rails, panels, or anything else you can think of. We call these parts, but really they don't have to be just parts. Some people use this for a pick list or for just any reason that they need to take a product and break it down into something else and get that data out. So come with me on one of your products to this parts tab. And from a zoomed out version, let me show you what this looks like. So this is the miter drawer front, and we have an output page here called frame list. And we're looking at what this user has decided to output for the frame list, styles and rails. They've chosen to put panel on a different output page, probably right here. You have total control over this. You can put these all together, split them all up, however it is that you want to see these and process these. So let me show you what we're looking at. To make this easier for us to process, I'm just going to delete these so you can see just one part at a time. So you could add parts just like this. Add, as many as you like. Once you add a part, you get this. The name is self-explanatory. You see that it displays here on the output page. Styles. The part export formula. So we will build some exporters later, but let me tell you what this is and how to use it. Let's say you have a saw that you can send data to and upload right into the saw for cutting. Well, what is it that saw needs to be able to cut out these styles? After you've built an exporter in another section of the site, which again we'll do later, select one, maybe this is called upcut saw, set the precision. So again, we can take a number and we can round it up or down depending on what this exporter needs to see. So even if the customer orders something that is in this level, but your saw can't handle that, we can round it to this. So set your precision to whatever your exporter needs, and then give the exporter the information it needs using variables from the right side. So you'll see that you can use order variables, so things that come from the order level, all kinds of information here. Group or item variables, so these come from the whole group, or attribute and part variables. So you can reference other parts and all of the attributes in your product, and also use attributes for this part. So we can take an attribute that we'll create later and actually use it in an export up here. So the way you do that, and this is typical, we'd say quantity, comma, width, comma, height, comma, and then maybe you want it to say something. So what this is going to do is take your part quantity, overall width, your overall height, and then it's going to say something, and it's going to send it out, on a line-by-line basis to the exporter. Now the exporter will have a lot to do with how this ends up looking coming out of Allmoxy. And again, we'll go there later, but I just want to show you what needs to happen at the part level underneath the product to make this work. Then you're going to tell it where you want it to appear. So in this case, we wanted it to show up on the frame list. So they selected output page, frame list. Here we are, frame list, styles. And it doesn't show up anywhere else. So that's the export section of a part. Now let me explain a little bit about part products, part attributes, and supplies and how they all fit together. So underneath a product, you have parts. And a product can have as many parts as it needs to. Think things like quantity, height, width, that kind of thing. Think an example of panel, styles, rails, stretchers, nailers, whatever. So you'd create the parts you need, and then you'd come back in and you'd say, okay, of this style or of this panel, what are the attributes I need to know about that? Those are part attributes. So quantity, width, height, for example. So for the product, we have the part and the quantity, width, and height of that part for every single product generated or ordered. And you can have as many part attributes as you need. Then you can add a supply to the part. And adding a supply to the part links a supply item from your inventory to these part attributes and parts that you can tell the system how much you're going to use. So an example, someone orders a cope and stick door out of maple. We've set this up to generate all the parts we need, panels, styles, rails, etc. So for the panel for this product the customer has ordered, we know that we have a quantity, a width, and a height. So using part attribute formulas, we know how big these parts are supposed to be. We know the sizes. And since we know the sizes and quantities, we can link them directly to a supply, in this case, 4/4 maple. And we can even estimate waste yields, allocate and deduct automatically from our inventory how much maple we'll need to fulfill these parts, this product, and ultimately the whole order. Okay, let's come back over here and look at the real version of this. Okay, so see we have parts. This is our part. This is our part attribute, part attribute, part attribute, and part supply. So that's where we link it to the supply. So check it out. We've already talked about the export part of this. Now let's look at the part attributes. It simply has a name. So if you look at, here's the name, and look how this works. So this is the part, these are the part attributes. This is the part, these are the part attributes. So it kind of just nests them underneath. Okay, so you give it a name and an output page width. So you can specify how much space do I want to take up on the output page. So with this one, we're looking here at the width of this. Then under the attribute formula, this is how do you want to calculate this thing. So how many, in this case, how many do we want of this part? Well, in this case, we know that for every product that gets ordered, they need 2 styles. So this is easy. The number is just 2. Other examples might be a little more complicated. So on the width, how do we figure the width of the style on this part? Well, using variables in the attribute formula, that's how we calculate it. So in this case, they're taking the width and then they're adding in some sort of machining adjustment, and that ends up being the width for the style. Now, if the part attribute that you're creating is measuring the quantity, tell the system so, because it uses that. And also you can hide the attribute on the output page. So if you need a part, quote unquote, just for reference, and you don't want to actually show it to anyone, this is what you would do. Most of the time you'll have this turned off. You can leave the output page width blank, and it's just going to do what it needs to do. So after you've created these part attributes all in a row, you can either create more of them or move on to the supply. So this is where we link all of these parts to a supply item so that we can allocate and deduct properly. And there are 2 ways to do it. You can either just select the attribute, which is what you'll do 99% of the time, or you can actually just go find something in your system that isn't even relevant to this product. And you can see why that's rarely used. So for the supply, you've got this formula. And this formula is saying, how do we figure out how much you are going to use of this supply? So check out what it's doing. It's doing a part width times length, times it by the quantity, dividing it by 144. So basically you're getting a board footage reading here. And then you're timesing it by wood type waste. So this is an interesting concept. We're actually adding in the waste for the type of wood that they're using. So as you might know, different woods are going to be more or less wasteful. So if we come down here, if we're looking at a product with an attribute that has a waste yield in it, so come here to wood type, and you see that they've added a column and put a waste yield in. So each one of these could be different. So if you had like a rustic material, this would be higher, and this number would just come from whatever research you found in your shop. So we're able to take this number and use it in the wood type waste supply linking. So now with this formula in place, we can actually take the correct amount from the correct supply based on the parts that we're going to need it for. So this will take some practice to bring all together. And what I want you to do now is to play around with this and create a whole bunch of parts and order some test orders and play around with these and look at them on your output pages to get a better idea of what they're doing. Also play around with some of the formulas and look at all the different things you can do with those. Plus, it would be a good idea to look at the more help section and review all of this information again so that you understand what kinds of things you can do in these formula sections. Okay, go to it, create some parts.